a lot of you guys know that I do. One of the things within an addiction is that the addiction has multiple facets, and one of them is the void or the trigger. So there's a void, and then there's a trigger, and then from the trigger there is a response. So all of us know about Pavlov's dog. We remember that psych experiment discussed back in the early psych classes of college or high school, where you got the dog, you hear the bell, the dog gets fed every time the bell is rung. The bell's rung just before the dog is fed. Then after a while, you can take away the food, ring the bell, and the dog will salivate without having any access to the food. Well, the idea is that they have associated a good feeling and reward with the sound of a bell. And they can get the dog to do a lot of things. The dog will come wherever they hear the bell because they think there's food. Well, the same thing with a human being is that there are triggers and there are actual rewards with chemical neurotransmitters and changes that happen in the brain that actually reward us for looking at a particular erotic image. So there's a sensation. Now, what's interesting about this, and the reason why companies like Viagra and Cialis and all of these additional pharmaceutical companies invest in pornography, is because they know this. And the real impact to a man is that impotency, as well as issues of ED occur because those cascades in the brain are desensitized. So if you, for example, take a hit of marijuana or cocaine or perhaps any of these other mood-altering substances, the first hit is always the strongest. The next hit isn't as strong, so you've got to up your dose. The same thing Chris, was talking about, Mustang was talking about earlier, is that most people have to go up in the level of intensity of those images in order to get the same stimulus that occurs. And that is an actual chemical modification to the brain, which does result in a lot of men in impotency. So when we look at it, there is a physical challenge. Just like smoking can cause lung cancer, we know that this is one of those areas that really impacts the body. It impacts women as well. And I know we're not going to get on women tonight, but we're going to probably bring in a woman or two for later shows. But the greatest and the biggest new addiction group are women. So guys are being affected, and it's every guy's battle. But I want to have each of you guys, what do you think about what I shared? What do you think about the neurological impact? And have any of you recognized that once you go away from pornography for a while and come back, there is this amazing intensity, which is almost like what Mustang said. You slip back into it, and the next thing you know, you're wondering how you could be worse.
Well, let me say this, and this is Brother Nola speaking. It is worse. When I started off real young, I walked into the room of a scene, and it was a live scene with a real man and a woman, and they was actually looking at it on television. Looking at the pornography on TV, and they was acting out the plays. And what made it worse for me was that when I watched it, I started to react like the monsters that I saw in the videos to women who never was experienced to it. Mm-hmm. And so I can say that it didn't have an effect on me, but I was so deep into sin, I was so deep into what I was doing that it wasn't until I pulled completely away from it that I started to see how it affected the women that I have slept with, because they have never been exposed to it. So it does changes your mindset.
But it changes your actions too. It changes your actions. Right. It changes your perception. That was one of the salient points that I really wanted you to get across, that a lot of guys don't realize that the fact that they watch these kinds of films and these kinds of images, it's very difficult to look at a woman in an upright fashion, because you've got all kinds of imagery of women in ways that is just not appropriate, and it also impacts the way that a loving relationship can be had, because you've got now all of this corrupt these corrupt actions, and these actions are then, you either have to experiment with them, or you have to push the boundaries, or you're just not, happy with the regular stuff. You've got to push and push and push in order to get the same level of intense reward. And I think you're absolutely right that there is so much that's lost in a loving relationship, because guys will come at women after watching this stuff like animals, and that's not loving. There's no love there. Brian, BA, did you want to comment on that and give me some feedbacks?
Well, that is definitely a true statement. And as I think about it, I'm sitting here, just to give you a little bit about myself, is I've been involved with a family where there was abuse. I won't go any further, but and yes, it led down to my addiction and my struggle with pornography, because the acts happened, and then also, let's just say, those magazines. We used to not live in the greatest areas, so we had easy access to this kind of junkyard area, and men, and I will state this, that all types of men, especially in the past, now it's more available, would get embarrassed with their pornography and try to get rid of it. Well, guess where it would end up? In the local junkyard, or in trash bags, or whatever like that. I'm not saying I went to the increase of looking through trash bags, but these magazines would be laying out, and from Hustler to Playboy, and I'm not trying to get anybody's mindset on the different magazines or ideas, but this is just my experiences, and my opinion is what that ended up doing me. Even the abuse, it desensitized me to the fact of really thinking of a woman as, now you got to remember, I'm a believer, and what I wanted to do was view a woman as a beautiful artifact and made by God for the purpose of Him to love, and showing me how to love her. Well, that was not my perception.
Sure. Not coming out of that, it would be very difficult for anybody. Sure.
So every part of the lady was hanging out in the magazine, and then it just got more and more from there. Like, I guess one of my counterparts said is, once one step has happened, so the magazines, well, watching it on TV, or them saying, hey, let's watch this movie, yet it didn't have all that clean stuff. It kept building, and then when it got to me alone, it was just like my mind. And we gotta think about this as a man, is our brains are computers. We store information ever since we were young in our minds. And what do you got to do to a computer to clean it out? You got to reboot it. And well, my mind, yes, I've rebooted it, but that just goes as an example of
it's very difficult once it's in to get out. It's
the
true.
Viruses are
viruses. Yeah, it's tough. And BA, you make a really good point. A lot of us don't realize that you can be sitting up, and I know this personally. You can be out of that pornography thing for years. And you can be sitting up in church, and just a completely unrelated place, or you can be in the car driving somewhere, and a completely unrelated experience, and those thoughts will cloud your thinking. So it's not just the fact that I'll have a little hit here or there. It's what happens that transforms your life all the way, and that you continue to have challenges. Which brings us to this whole notion of relationships with women. The value of women is oftentimes degraded. We'll call it a lot of things. We'll call it locker room talk. We'll call it a bunch of things. But at the end of the day, nobody wants their mother, their daughter, their wife called that. And I think a lot of times we have to take some responsibility as men in terms of looking at how we view women. And I don't mean just because we view them in pornography. I mean, how do we view them? And I think that pornography creates a really dangerous precedent for a young, impressionable mind in terms of how they view women, how they view sex, how they view family bonds, because none of what happens in pornography really isn't glorifying to women. For that matter, it's not glorifying to men either. So when we look at this, how do we start the process of beginning to look at women in a good way when we get out of that kind of a situation?
Oh, I've got you on that one right there.
Okay. Chime in.
Any of us married men. Nola, are you married, brother?
Yes, I'm married right now with 2 boys, and I got actually 3 boys.
That's what I thought. Yeah, married. Yeah, many of us married men. We know this for the most part. Of course, that doesn't mean every guy. Obviously, there's guys listening, but most of us married men, I think, will agree. Most part, we chase our wives around most of the time. They're always having headaches, or they're always having, I have a long day. You're like, man, I want to be with you. I want to be with you. I want to be with you. Oh, I got a headache, baby. Oh, I want to be with you. I want to be with you. Oh, I have a long day, baby. So anyway, what I began noticing, of course, and then we might resort to pornography or something like that. Anyway,
I want to talk about that. Wait. Don't roll over that. Don't roll over that. Right there. Stop right there. Say that again. Say what happened. Say because you just spoke for 95% of guys who feel justified in watching pornography. Say it again.
This is going to be great. You guys are going to really like this because I'm about to tell you something that I did in my life that actually changed. So anyway, what I just said, just for anybody that didn't catch it, most of us married men notice that we chase our wives around most of the time. They always seem to have headaches. They always seem to have a long day. So because of that, we resort to pornography. When we resort to it becomes a vicious cycle. This is what I noticed. It becomes a vicious cycle. So I'm chasing my wife around. Hey, honey, will you do these unspeakable acts that you know that you don't want to do, but I want you to do anyway? And she's like, no, I really don't want to do those. And before long, she didn't even have to say, no, I don't want to do those. She just has a headache, or she's just tired, or she just doesn't want to do this or that, whatever. So long story short, I go to pornography because pornography will do it for me. So, all right, cool. I'll see all these unspeakable acts. These women that I'm convinced, these women, most of the women, 95% of the women that are doing these don't want to do either. But okay, anyway, let me get past that. What I noticed in my life, when I began working, so I remember I'll never forget, I was in college, I was doing stuff in college online, and I would just be working and like getting things done, and then I might, before my wife came home, I might clean the kitchen or do something like that, and I wouldn't ignore her at all, but sex just wasn't on my mind at the time. That was like the biggest turn on for this lady. Like, she would just come over me while I was typing on the computer, and she would just like wrap her arms around me and just like, oh wow, and I was like, man, like, can you leave me like I'm working, Okay, so what began happening, or it started clicking with me. Wait a minute. When I start doing things that she likes around the house, or not sitting there requesting sex every day or every 5 minutes, grabbing her boobs every time I see her, grabbing her butt every time I see her. Instead, let me hold you. How was your day? How are things going? Basically shifting the focus from me and my penis to her and her needs and what she likes. She wanted to have sex with me more. Let me repeat that. My wife wanted to have sex with me more. And because of the increased frequency of sex, then I had less of a need that I felt was unmet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think there are a couple of points that I want to redress. And we've got 4 minutes on the clock, and we can't put this all in one podcast. We're going to have to do another podcast. But I just want to point out the first thing is trigger. You pointed out a trigger. The trigger was you had an appetite, you had a need. It wasn't met in the way that you wished it to be met. We understand that there will be times when the woman's not interested, or the kids are in the way, or the circumstances don't allow. But what we do have to recognize is that even the Bible itself says, but for a short season of prayer should one not have intercourse. But meaning that intercourse should be the primary focus between a man and his wife because of the need to keep temptation at bay. So that's number one. Number two is the notion of meeting another's needs. The one thing that pornography, again, falls short of is that it does not meet the needs of it's meeting your needs in a wrong way, but it does not allow you to meet the needs of others. So it's a very selfish act. In other words, self-gratification is the focus of what pornography does. It turns your love and affection inwards or personal, as opposed to reaching out and interacting and interfacing and building a relationship with someone else. So that's another deficit. It creates an antisocial type of interaction for something that should be intimate between two people. And the final thing that I did want to bring attention to before we go, and we're going to pick this up in our second half, is the importance of understanding how to nurture and how to build on those relationships that we have so that we don't fall victim to the temptation of pornography.